but he is exercising his right as a comrade in the movement and a citizen of what was going to be an independent country to talk. Let me see. This one, liberated territory. I think this whole concept of liberated territory, liberated zones is something that can give rise to a lot of research. Southern Portuguese Guinea at the time, 1968. The clearing in the jungle from which the Grenada, they always refer to the jungle, I'm telling you no jungles, but anyway, from which the Grenada television team, so that's the film there. This is where they started out and were taken to the South Front. And this is
from the bush.
And again, this is Eduardo Mondlane, 1969, photographed at the Second Congress.
Yes, indeed, that's Mondlane.
And so maybe it's a misnomer to say the Amilcar Cabral collection, but this is a picture of Amilcar Cabral. You may have seen this picture, but this is the original taken by the photographer who took it. So this was in Dakar, Senegal, February 4th, 1968. He is Secretary General of the PAIGC at this time. And what else? This is more war picture. Liberated territory, southern port. There's a whole different geography of Africa when you consider it from the standpoint of liberation movements. It's not about colonial borders. It's something else. This one again is 1968. Paulo Correa, political commissar of the South Front. And both Ms. Moleketi and Dr. Cerruti can tell you what it meant to be a political commissar in these times. Not an easy job.
The president can say
as the president, not an easy job. And this is Basil Davidson in younger times with the film team. So these are the this is what I'm turning over. So it's not like a Amilcar Cabral collection, which I hope that the library eventually acquires. But these you won't necessarily find.
All right, and we come out of that and wrap up on point 4 today at the top of the hour.
So the story is, it's not very serious. He came to London, addressed a public meeting, and then question and answer period. So some English person asks a question, and he stands up to answer. And he starts off by saying, well, with regard to that question, we don't think, and then a heckler from before, we know that. He sits in the middle of the sentence. When he said, we don't think that is true, or something like that. But he said, we don't think, as soon as he said, don't think, this Englishman, we know that, because you don't think. So everybody laughed in the hall. He laughed also. But I mean, really thanks for all of this material, because when we thought of the library here, we really didn't think of it as a South African library, but basically as an African center, where all of us on the continent have a place to engage one another, basically about the future of the continent, which it would be better to do that with some consciousness of the past. And therefore, where do we want the continent to be? As I say, not just South Africa. Because, you know, the Africanness of the Africans is in their being together, including the African diaspora. For instance, Amilcar Cabral quite correctly deals in his teachings, in his leadership, with his questions about identity. Who are we and as Africans? Not only the people of Guinea-Bissau, but just as Africans. I've told a story about that, not necessarily relating to Amilcar Cabral, but the sense of identity. That one day I spoke to President Bouteflika of Algeria, and I was saying to him that I suggest we should do a bit of a study about the impact of colonialism on both countries. Because these two countries, Algeria and South Africa, had the biggest number of European settlers, real examples of settler colonialism, these two. And that we need to look at them and say, what was the impact of that settler colonialism on these two countries? So I was telling him that, you see, for instance, here in South Africa, settler colonialism in part meant really destroying the identity of the African population. It must cease to, in a sense, to exist in terms of an identity, so that then it becomes malleable to be used in whatever way. So you're no longer a Thabo, you are Jim. Your religion is gone. Your customs are gone. Your everything is gone. So it's the colonizer that then defines you in a particular way, from the name and everything else, that makes you a pliable instrument. So I say so to President Bouteflika. I say, so I would like us to, what happened to Algeria? The impact of settler colonialism. Is there anything comparable? So he said to me, you are very late. We've already done that study. He says, during your years of struggle, we got some French people to go into South Africa. They're not Algerian, but they're comrades. So they went into South Africa as ordinary French people to study exactly this question. And one of the fundamental things we found was that what saved the Algerians from that process of loss of identity was religion, was Islam. So they couldn't change our names, the Muhammads and the whoever else, and the religion remained. And that is what made it impossible for French colonization to turn the Algerians into the kind of African that the colonialism in South Africa did. So it's very interesting. So we have a discussion about this that actually I'd never understood. I'd never discussed the role of religion in a context like that on the continent. But what I'm trying to say, Professor, is that, you see, to bring in Amilcar Cabral into this library, it brings in a particular perspective. Because this was an African leader, and his ideas and thinking and so on about the future of the struggle, of course, in Guinea-Bissau, sure, but the future of us as Africans and the future of the continent, the culture of the diaspora, that has become part of the basis on which we then say, okay, we start from there, where do we want to be tomorrow? So I'm saying that really we couldn't have the library without Cabral in it. And I'm quite certain that we'll continue to talk to people, to add to this valuable material that you brought, to add to this, because it's part of what has got to define what's in the library. Not as stored material, but as live material to say it's a collective experience of the Africans. Here it is, including these outstanding leaders of the continent like Amilcar Cabral. It will help us to say, what do we do about Africa today and tomorrow? So now I'm saying thanks a lot for this material. It's a very, very good beginning. A very, very good beginning about an important person in the definition of the Africans and the vision about our future. As I say, you're very, very correct to refer to the African diaspora in Brazil and your characterization of that diaspora. very important, not just the US, the Caribbean, but the Brazilian one, very bigger. In many instances, people were saying that the African diaspora in Brazil constitutes probably the 4th, 5th biggest African population in the world, including the Africans in Africa. So I'm saying that angle also brings into this notion of ours a library that serves as a base for the accumulation of all of this African knowledge, to use that knowledge for the purposes really of defining our own future. You can't define your own future as Africans, I'm sure, without the participation of Amilcar Cabral. You see, unlike the English heckler who said, we know you don't think, he was quite wrong. We do think. And then Amilcar Cabral could think, thought very well. But Prof, thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be able to.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We'll just have 1 or 2 questions.
Yes, I have quite a number of questions. This is the opportunity I'm not going to miss. The Prof spoke about the Durban conference. Mr. President, you were the president, I remember was there. It was so difficult to get parties to agree. But when you look at where we are now as the globe in the world in terms of issues that deals with discrimination and trying to erode, what Africans stood for and all of that. When you look at the world today, are we making progress in trying to address the previous challenges of discrimination? The second question, it's linked to Ukraine, looking at the Ukraine war. What can we learn as Africans? And then the other question is on the elections in Kenya. We spoke about the role of liberating the continent with the intention to make it the best region. When you look at what happened in Kenya recently, you were the chair of the mission in 2017, leading the observer mission there. What's your reaction? And finally, on the Angola, MPLA losing support. Is this where ANC is going and other liberation organizations that were in the bush, as the documents kind of tell us the role of liberation? Is that kind of history being erased by poor performance?
Professor Augusto is asking.
My president.
Sophie, can we have an agreement to negotiate a deal? I was very, very glad to see you when I came, and you said everybody else was with you here, to report about this important occasion of the beginning of the Amilcar Cabral in our library here. And the importance of that even to the National Library, that the National Library of South Africa would be present, because all of us understand the importance of that. And really I would plead that we communicate that to the South African people. It's important not only for us in this room, but the people of South Africa to know. And I think the people of Africa generally to know. So I think we need to tell that story. You promise?
Yes, Mr. President. It will be a separate
That's a deal.
story. Yes.
Okay, now with regard to these other matters that you are raising, which were not on our agenda. I'll say something about them because of the commitment you've made.
Yes. I will.
No editor above you will say no.
I'm the editor.
Okay. And with regard to the Conference Against Racism and Intolerance and so on in Devon, I think part of what's important about that is that the UN put in place a follow-up process. So it was not just a conference took place and whatever decisions were taken or not taken, and that was the end of the matter. It was, in fact, to put that matter of racism and xenophobia and all of those questions permanently on the international agenda. I think that was an important thing. So, indeed, those processes of a review of those questions continues. The periodic reviews throughout the UN system. Where are we? Exactly the question that you are asking. I think that's an important achievement, and I think it's important that should continue to happen. No, I don't think there's the problems haven't gone away. Not in the least. I think that those challenges remain. They might express themselves in different ways, but essentially they remain the same. Sure, there would have been improvements somewhere, here, there, and everywhere, but I think there would also might have very well have been negative developments somewhere else about matters like this. If you look at the issue of migration, for instance, the migration of thousands and thousands of Africans into Europe, and what happens to them. I mean, even to the point of people dying in the Sahara Desert or drowning in the Mediterranean and so on, because of this thing, because of a concept of a fortress Europe. And all of the effort to say these Africans must be bottled in Africa there, and the argument being part of the argument of the Europeans, being that the more they come here, the more they will corrupt our culture, change our own identity as Europeans. So better let them. So I'm saying that to see or you have a similar response in the U.S. To migration from the South, from Latin America, which in many instances is driven by exactly the matters that were under discussion in Durban. So, Aluta continue in that sense about that particular matter. The elections in Kenya, I think the good thing that has happened that when Raila Odinga thought something had gone wrong, I was very, very pleased that when he said we're going to court, at the same time and consistently, the very first time he said that, he said, look, I'm going to court because there's something wrong. But please, let's all be peaceful, no violence, no nothing like that. We'll resolve the matter in this way. And he's consistently repeated that statement. Very, very important posture that is taken, because it's clear from what I can see from afar that indeed many of his supporters who seem to be moving from a position that they were certain of victory. And when the Electoral and the Boundaries Commission said, no, William Ruto has won, you could have had a response which was violent and destructive. But I'm saying the intervention of Raila Odinga to say don't go that route, I think was very, very important. And indeed, I think that's one of the things that marked the Kenyan elections is one. They're very peaceful. All of the leaders, William Ruto, Uhuru Kenyatta, Raila, and so on, all of them have communicated the same message. And I'm very, very glad the population has responded like that, peacefully. So So I'm hoping that even when whatever the courts decide, the population will respond in a similar manner, accept whatever the courts say, again peacefully, because in the end, part of what William Ruto, for instance, has said, which was very important in my view, was that these particular elections in Kenya, a lot of what informed the elections, the electorate, was no longer tribal ethnic divisions. That the population was discussing policy matters, where do we want Kenya to be tomorrow? And he raised this matter, I thought, very, very well. That fortunately, as Kenyans were beginning to move from these ethnic-based, tribal-based divisions in the country, so that we as Kenyans, we become Kenyans, now we're discussing common challenges. So I think we need to sustain that. And this peace question is important in that regard. I think what's happened in Angola, I haven't seen the final results of those elections. But I'm not surprised. I would not have been surprised that the elections would result in a UNITA, which is a more competitive position relative to MPLA. And really the reason of this, in my view, is that in a sense, people are moving away from the days of struggle, the days of the war, to be Angolans at peace, and ask the question, therefore, what do we as Angolans want to make of our country? Not as what as a UNITA constituency versus the MPLA constituency, as defined by the war. Where do we stand? No, but a more united national position. So I would therefore imagine indeed that in that case, inevitably, UNITA would increase in its support in the country. It doesn't. I don't think it's a comparable. I don't think of a comparable situation to that one in Angola. South Africa doesn't. The ANC situation wouldn't compare to that. The specifics of the political evolution in Angola, part of which was very much this issue of ethnic identity, a very important element in that particular struggle. The Ovimbundu support a particular position, the Kimbundu support a position, the Bakongo support, that kind of thing. I'm saying this more recent elections shows a departure from those identities to a common Angolan identity. And I think part of that is as a result of the positions that President Lorenzo took once he came into government. And very, very firm, correct position to say, I come from the MPLA, I'm MPLA. I canvass now and I'm elected president of Angola as an MPLA candidate. But we as the government of Angola have done many things that are wrong, like the corruption matter. And President Lorenzo has attacked that matter of corruption in Angola very, very vigorously, even where it's affected the family of the late President dos Santos. He's tackled it head on, and I think, therefore, the population begins to say, what identifies President Lorenzo is not a partisan interest. I am MPLA, therefore I must protect MPLA at all costs. This is a Angolan. And where my party has done wrong things, I must say they're wrong and try to correct them. That's a more, you level the playing field in that sense. So even UNITA can't come in to accuse him, President Lorenzo, of ignoring corruption. They can't. They must praise him and say, you took a very principled position on this matter. And so what do we do together? Because that's the same position we took. What do we do together as Angolans? So I think in a situation like that, inevitably you move away from the war memory. Inevitably, UNITA would increase in terms of its popular strength. It's part of the history. I've answered all your questions, haven't I?
No, you didn't answer Ukraine and Russia. As a person who's familiar with the Soviet Union politics previous.
No, I mean about Ukraine and Russia, I support the position taken by our government here, the South African government, which is that really these two belligerents must come together and to end the war and find a peaceful solution. I would add to that solution, the people must engage that process of the solution. So also the United States and the NATO countries. This quarrel does not originate from the Ukrainians and the Russians. The problem originates from the expansion of NATO to the borders of Russia, with an insistence by the NATO countries that Ukraine must become a member of NATO. It's an old problem. Even Winston Churchill, while he was alive, opposed that. He spoke out openly and said it is wrong to move this organization to the borders of what was then the Soviet Union. He says it's wrong, because inevitably it's going to produce this conflict. I'm saying Winston Churchill, of all people, the one who spoke about an iron, what did you call that thing? An iron curtain and so on. But he understood the security concerns, and then he was very specific. We must recognize that the Soviet Union and Soviet people have got a legitimate security concern. And of course, Churchill was very familiar, very aware of the Second World War. The Soviets were attacked by Nazi Germany, and 20 million people were killed. 20 million people were killed. And so now you advance the Western countries, a military organization like NATO, towards their borders. Churchill said, what do you think is going to happen? So that's what I'm saying. I think position of the South African government is correct. Let these countries come together and make for peace, but that peace process must include the United States and NATO, because they are very much involved in this conflict. You keep to our deal, no?
No, I'll definitely report on the story today.
Thanks.
I just stole time to ask these questions because we've been struggling to get hold of me.
That's the future stories,
but perhaps the question to the Prof. Prof, you spoke about how they wanted to do a feature on Cabral. So I want to know, did it happen? Are you looking at partnering with a broadcaster or film company to do that? And if yes,
you should understand that the project is above all a project of Flora Gomez of Guinea-Bissau. So
Whether, I believe that he will do it. This is one of his life's ambitions. It's in abeyance now. I can't answer for him, you know, when, what, how, but I know that this is a lifetime project or goal of his, and that there's no better suited person to do that. I think now there is much more interest due to a confluence of factors in Africans telling their own stories through film. Part of it is changes in technology, part of it is rise of Nollywood, and even the SABC is very different now from what it was when I first started coming here in '94. And I think that a propitious moment can arise. But the person to best answer that question is not me, but Flora Gomez. And he lives in Guinea-Bissau. He's very committed to his country. A lot of filmmakers and companies in France, because, you know, he's French and Portuguese speaking, have said to him, you know, why don't you just leave there and you can be a star in the United States or in France. Occasionally his films are shown at the festival at Cannes to acclaim. He was honored this year, and I don't know why I couldn't go. I think I may have had COVID, but Harvard University, their film institute, honored him with a special award. He is feted and honored in Brazil, obviously, and I think that he will get to do it. But when, how, in partnership with whom, that's not for me to say. He is alive and well, so if you want to know, you can contact him. He lives in Guinea-Bissau, he works in Guinea-Bissau. Most of his films are done there. I think he did one in Zimbabwe. The site for it was in Zimbabwe. It's called the Republic of Children. And he got assistance from Danny Glover, the African-American actor, activist, who always supports that kind of thing. So there will probably be such a film by Flora Gomez. When and where and how is not a question for me to answer. He's my comrade, he's my friend, but he's the filmmaker.
So he might say the SABC might want to talk to him
That would be, yeah, very
about
interesting.
that project.
Could be.
Yeah.
Should travel to Guinea-Bissau. So,
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Prof, Chairperson. Thank you very much for it. Come to the end. Thanks.
thank you.
Thanks so much.
Take away this microphone. Catches us saying wrong things.
Okay, maybe for Sweden.
There's one thing missing. Thank you so much, guys. It's just an attachment.
Has been outsourced.
Because he answered very easy questions about very interesting stories.
But